Communication in its simplest form entails the exchange of information, a process that influences efficient and effective performance in organizations. Communication is a fundamental component in effective project management, and considering that only 14% of professionals rate their project management as efficient, with 15% rating it as poor, it is important to analyze the basics of organizational communication. Managerial functions and team collaborations in organizations are all founded on communication. Planning, organizing, directing, and leading all require appropriate and sustainable communication channels. Appropriate communication has largely been associated with employee motivation and satisfaction, both massively contributing to improved performance in the workplace. Communication is fundamental in developing and sustaining workplace relationships, a phenomenon responsible for the creation of positive work environments. Despite that communication remains a fundamental component of organizational performance, it would be wrong to assume that all communication is meaningful. Particularly, this era of the Internet has exposed the shortcomings that could arise from increasing the ease of sharing information, especially oversharing. While we all know how important communication is in an organization, are we aware exactly how important effective communication is? Some statistics for you. 92% of employees have to repeat information shared to 2 or more people in an organization. 85% of professionals find it annoying to have to repeat information when dealing with businesses. 74% of professionals have switched an organization for their competitor owing to the perceptions of disorganization. Only 17% of professionals believe that their businesses or organizations are well organized. Even though 85% of professionals believe that communication is fundamental in the functioning of an organization, 80% of employees rate their business communication as average or poor. 96% of professionals believe that the businesses they deal with should improve their communication and project management. Even with the knowledge of the importance of communication, it is clear organizations aren't getting it right, so let's explore some basics. Communication does not occur until both information and comprehension have been exchanged between the sender and the receiver. This is a simple illustration of the communication process, which contains the sender, the receiver, the feedback, and the barriers to communication. The sender is the initiator of the communication process, while the receiver provides feedback. Decoding and interpreting received communication is dependent on the receiver's experiences and the underlying frames of reference. This simple model has been used to develop others that are similarly simple or more complex. For instance, a communication model with 4 components contains encoding, medium of transmission, decoding, and feedback. Encoding entails the transformation of information into a message, using symbols that represent meaningful ideas or concepts. The symbols include words, and language by extension, and gestures. The transmission medium, which can be oral or written, is used to convey the message. Selecting the appropriate medium or channel is accompanied by decoding the message, where the receiver processes and interprets the shared message. Once the message has been interpreted, the receiver provides the feedback, making them the sender and restarting the whole communication again. Feedback is not mandatory in one-way communication. Other communication processes begin with idea formation, where the sender determines the need for communication. Effective communication is dependent on how accurate the receiver interprets the shared information. Accurate interpretation also determines the quality of feedback provided in communication. Feedback allows senders and receivers to adjust their communication outputs accordingly, thereby enhancing efficiency. Ignored or insufficient feedback often takes a negative form, especially in the context of one-way communication. One-way communication contains a one-directional message that doesn't require a response or feedback. An example would be a physician writing prescription to a patient, which does not allow the patient to ask questions directly related to the prescription. However, the patient, at a later date, could share some recovery feedback with the doctor in a different communication engagement. This phenomenon, looked at in a holistic context, presents the need for two as opposed to one-way communication, since it provides more information and raises the clarity of a particular communication instance. One-way communication provides more efficiency, while two-way communication is characterized by better clarity. The doctor-patient scenario takes us back to the frames of reference that determine how recipients interpret communication. The various forms of feedback include descriptive, evaluative, and prescriptive. Descriptive feedback determines how an individual communicates. Evaluative feedback assesses how individuals communicate, especially the quality or impact, and prescriptive feedback encompasses advising individuals on appropriate communication patterns. The format and intent of feedback is accompanied by its various levels, namely, procedural, relational, individual and group feedback. Procedural feedback focuses on issues surrounding effectiveness and appropriateness, including the quality of a group's output, such as employee satisfaction, that could be used in correction. Relational feedback emphasizes how groups get along by interpreting the underlying dynamics. Individual feedback focuses on specific person-oriented elements in group, such as individuals' knowledge, skills, attitude, and organization. Group feedback assesses group dynamics, including the underlying communication network and the knowledge that exists within a team. Overall, employees, and organizations by extension, should view feedback, not as a negative component of communication, but as a crucial tool in goal, awareness, and learning enhancement for the growth of teams and organizations. This is the Johari window, a feedback model that focuses on enhancing employees' communication skills by identifying individuals' strengths and weaknesses. The window is a psychological model developed in 1955 by Joseph Luft and Harry Ingham. The model is used in training and understanding in self-awareness, personal development, interpersonal relationships, group dynamics, team development, intergroup communication, and improving overall personal communication. The Johari window emphasizes soft skills, including intergroup and personal development, cooperation, empathy, and behavior. The simplicity of the model ensures it can be applied to different situations. As you can see, the model takes the shape of a window matrix with the disclosure and feedback axes. The first pane explores what is known by an individual and others by willingly sharing information. Anything an individual knows and is willing to share falls in the first pane. Disclosure is one of the fundamentals of building trust, especially within teams, and promotes openness. Information about a person, including their attitudes, behavior, emotions, feelings, skills and views, are known by themselves as others. The second pane comprises of information others know about an individual while they themselves don't know. This pane is an individual's blind area, with the blindness being reduced by being open to both positive and negative feedback from others, otherwise known as feedback solicitation. The third window comprises of communication-related information individuals know but they're unwilling to share. This information includes experiences, fears, beliefs, and values that determine individuals' behaviors. Individuals might be reluctant to share some of this information because it could influence others' perceptions of themselves. The last pane, which comprises of the unknown, provides the opportunity for individuals to grow through the consistent focus on self-actualization. The unknown component of the fourth window pane is characterized by things one has never tried or experienced. Examples of the elements that fall in the unknown area include underestimated or untried opportunities, natural abilities or aptitudes, fears, unknown illnesses, repressed or subconscious feelings, and learned behaviors. How do the various window panes interact to improve workplace communication? The first step, which starts at the first pane, entails self-awareness diagnosis. This diagnosis involves identifying personal strengths and weaknesses, determining the extent of disclosure, and embracing honesty and clarity. Awareness diagnosis helps people explore the qualities that define them. The second step requires consulting with other people and gathering feedback, especially about oneself. Increasing the open area in window pane 1 facilitates the reception of feedback and a subsequent reduction in the blind area of pane 2. Reducing the hidden area is done through consistent disclosure, which when combined with feedback, minimizes the unknown area of pane 4. So how does all this come together to improve communication in the workplace? Consistent feedback and disclosure allows individuals to constantly interact with their communication-related strengths and weaknesses. Both communication components, that is feedback and disclosure, ensures team members are aware of others and their own growth opportunities. Open communication improves employee motivation and commitment to performance. Understanding the shortcomings of the Johari window is essential in guaranteeing its effective use. These shortcomings include the unnecessary nature of communicating some occurrences. Receivers could be senders of the same information in a different chain, and some people are more open to feedback than others. Communication channels determine how messages, or information, are passed between the sender and the receiver. These channels are broadly categorized into verbal and non-verbal communication. Verbal communication, in its simplest form, uses words, whether said or written. Dialogues, which form one of the most common forms of verbal communication, are discussions between people. The fundamental principles of a successful dialogue include engaging with only the motivated, using a facilitator for process recording and management, developing and adhering to developed procedures, upholding confidentiality, and sustaining the communication process autonomy by avoiding control by a member of the dialogue. These principles are fundamental in workplace-related dialogues if employees aim at going for effective communication. Face-to-face verbal communication is suitable for all situations, but more important for others, such as when a manager or supervisor is giving instructions for the completion of a particular task that directly contributes to the overall output of a team. Written communication is preferred when sharing complex information or pieces of information that could require future references. The slowness shortcoming of written communication has been solved by technological advancements, especially the invention of social media and electronic mail, all of which enable computer-aided communication. Email and other online chat rooms have completely revolutionized written communication by optimizing instantaneous coordination in the workplace. 65% of businesses use email as the primary source of communication, compared to 16% who use online tools, 9% who use calls, and 5% who rely on face-to-face communication. 39% of businesses use email as the primary mode of communication between co-workers, 28% use online tools, 23% use face-to-face, and 2% use phone calls as the primary mode of communication. 39% of professionals who manage their projects using email map their daily activities using to-do lists compared to 17% of those who use other online tools. 22% of businesses that use online communication tools, compared to 12% of those that use emails, rate their project efficiency as excellent. 37% of businesses that use online communication tools, compared to 14% of those that use emails, rate their project communication as excellent. 25% of businesses that use online tools as the primary form of communication, compared to 15% of those who use emails, report greater confidence in their project organization. The growth of internet use and availability of mobile devices has eliminated the geographical barriers to communication. The intranet, which is, just like the internet, but with a network of users and computers restricted to a particular organization, promotes privacy and confidentiality, which is especially fundamental in competitive fields or industries. The internet, intranet, and extranet facilitate effective communication by increasing the distribution of information. Common benefits of electronically shared written communication, especially emails, include reduced time and cost of distributing information, increased coordination due to the ease of communication, and the flexibility of communication, especially because of the availability of mobile devices. A common shortcoming of written electronic communication revolves around an employee being overwhelmed. The fact that electronic communication is not slow implies that over-communicating by oversharing information is a real risk. Oversharing information overtakes the whole idea of simple effective communication, as employees could be unable to read, digest, and respond to all available information. Eventually, initiated communication becomes useless if not detrimental to an organization. 65% of employees have lost a file in their inbox, 74% of employees have lost files that have been shared with others, and 63% of professionals have missed an important piece of information that went to their colleagues' inbox when they were away. Also, electronic mail has moved beyond the slow nature of written communication but has not yet been able to include the transfer of emotion between the sender and receiver. The tone associated with a particular message is often misinterpreted, which leads to misunderstandings that break down communication. Emoticons and emojis have been developed to try include the emotion component in written communication, but it has not quite gotten to the level of face-to-face communication. Speaking of emotions, flaming refers to the exchange of heated messages using emails. Besides, email communication has proven to be a very useful tool for hacking and scams, especially through Trojan horses or viruses and business email compromise, which is notorious in the transfer of funds. While all these shortcomings of using emails could deter their use, the potential benefits offer greater source of consideration. Also, it is more important for employers and employees to understand both the positives and negatives of technological innovations for appropriate use. Netiquette is a common internet-based approach that is used in organizations to address and minimize the impact of the shortcomings listed before. The approach includes keeping emails shorter than 25 lines and avoiding the sharing of sensitive information, whether personal or organizational, through the internet. Netiquette is a common organizational best practice in this era of widespread technological use. Nonverbal communication entails the exchange of information without using actual words. The various types of nonverbal communication include paralanguage, proxemics, facial expressions, and kinesics. Proxemics refer to the study of individuals' perceptions, as well as how they use their space. Proxemics revolve around the physical distance between individuals when communicating, delivering a speech, or sharing intimate moments. For instance, managers and supervisors instruct employees working on a similar project to sit together or in the same room to improve cooperation and coordination. When sharing secrets with a close friend, the proxemics are different to when one is attending a lecture. Most people prefer silence in an elevator because of the limited space, which could adversely affect communication, especially for claustrophobic people. Proxemics could then be used to explain why organizations are divided into departments that have their own office spaces, and depending on the size of the organization, their own floors. Abiding by others' proxemics improves the quality of communication as it encourages openness and comfort. Kinesics is the use of body language to convey information. For instance, drumming fingers and pacing are used to show nervousness, while rubbing the temple and wringing hands indicate stress. Facial expressions and eye behavior, such as avoiding eye contact, are indicative of lacking confidence. Depending on the culture and the context of communication, avoiding eye contact could signify respect and openness. Some of the nonverbal cues that convey confidence in the workplace include eye contact, confident handshakes, effective gestures, appropriate dressing, authoritative postures, facial expressions that are appropriate with the situation, initiating interactions, being attentive, and responding to nonverbal cues. Paralanguage focuses on the elements of voice, including pitch, speech rate, volume, and quality. Rapid loud speech indicates anger or nervousness. Some of the nonverbal communication elements that significantly influence the quality of communication include arriving late to a meeting, avoiding eye contact, sitting posture, increased hand or body movement, getting very close, and talking fast, among others. After examining verbal and nonverbal communication channels, it is important to analyze the factors that influence channel choice. These factors include the information components, the purpose, and number of receivers or recipients. Information components include richness or detail, meaningfulness, urgency, feedback and sensitivity. Noteworthy, the richness of information is the volume and variety a channel can support without distortion. Face-to-face interaction provides both verbal and nonverbal communication capabilities, as well as exchanging feedback and seeking clarity. This communication approach is fundamental in sharing non-routine, unclear communication that requires constant interaction and clarity. Employees, and organizations at large, should realize that the choice of communication channel moves beyond the actual message as it symbolizes the meaning attached to the message, especially in terms of importance. It is worth noting that 61% of employees feel that meetings are a waste of their time, a statistic that should heavily inform the choice of communication. The barriers to communication are either environmental or personal. These barriers distort, alter, or block communication, thereby reducing its efficiency. Environmental barriers are concerned with the workplace setting. For instance, competing for time and attention could involve various employees, which interferes with the quality of communication. Particularly, it is likely that continuous simultaneous exchange of information could lead to misinterpretation owing to inadequate attention that comes with active listening. The listening process requires intellectual, emotional, and physical inputs for understanding. The lack of time, such as pressure from supervisors, prevents employees from carefully examining the information they exchange, thereby limiting the likelihood of sharing meaningful information. Insufficient time to interact with shared information also reduces the quality of feedback provided by message recipients. Additional environmental communication barriers in the workplace include power plays in sender-receiver relationships, hierarchical information sharing, and restrictive or rigid managerial philosophies. Restrictive managerial philosophies are characterized by requiring communication to follow the chain of command, as well as lacking attention and concern for juniors. Managers who are poor at upholding intra-organizational communication, both upwards and downwards, end up creating structural blockages. Multi-level hierarchies raise the complexity of sharing information, which mostly translates into distortion. Different people have varying frames of reference which they use to interpret shared information. Thus, raising the links in a single communication channel increases the risk of distorting the original information. The power play component of workplace-related relationships interferes with the smooth flow of communication channels. Workplace experiences, such as bullying, limit the extent to which individuals can be open when communicating. Also, using complex terminologies that are not easy to understand reduces the effectiveness of communication. Exchanging information between two people who use different terminologies results in distortion because different meanings are attached to similar words. Thus, misunderstandings are bound to occur with the use of unfamiliar terminology. Personal barriers arise from the constantly highlighted frames of references, individual experiences, beliefs, and value systems. These person-oriented components determine how individuals perceive and interpret shared information. Preconceived biases and prejudices influence how individuals process information, especially based on the sender. Evaluating the source determines various information perceptions, including the serious and sensitivity. Status quo, which is when individuals prefer the present situations they are in, informs the filtering of what might be perceived as undesirable information. Selective perceptions, which is the retention of desirable parts of a message while discarding the undesirable ones, and fear or jealously negatively affect how individuals interpret information. Lack of an emotional or goal-oriented connection between the sender and the receiver results in neglect or insensitivity, which breaks down communication. People could also distort or block information for their personal gains. Identifying the barriers to communication is one thing and overcoming them is another. The barriers have to be identified before the relevant strategies are implemented to overcome them. Overall, overcoming environmental barriers requires senders and receivers to devote their time to active listening by paying attention. Management philosophies should encourage the free flow of communication across various levels of the organization. Cross-organizational management processes as opposed to functional or departmental procedures improve the flow of communication. Human resource policies, especially training and rotation, enhance cooperation among employees. Also, reducing the links between the sender and the receiver, or simplifying the communication channels, minimizes the risk of distorting information. Power play in workplace relationships is solved by cultivating a collaborative workplace culture that encourages individuals to be open in communication. The terminologies used in official workplace communication should be standardized to lower the risk of misinterpreting some terms. Symbols and actions should also be standardized for similar reasons of minimizing the risk of distorting shared information. In a nutshell, power play is solved by standardizing words and symbols, as well as reinforcing words with actions. Competing for time is solved by allocating appropriate time for active listening. Simplifying communication channels sorts out all the issues that arise from complexity. For instance, diagonal communication channels reduce the link between senders and receivers. Some of the listed personal barriers to effective communication include bias, prejudice, anger, beliefs, values, selective perception, fear, evaluating the source, and lacking empathy. Solving these personal barriers requires one to actively strive towards understanding others' frames of reference, as well as their beliefs. Addressing personal barriers to communication also requires recognizing that other people could also exhibit similar personal barriers, thereby requiring a bit of empathy and understanding.